The laws of Shabbos. We continue in chapter 12. A person who kindles the smallest fire is liable. Liable means if it was inadvertently, accidentally, then you have to bring a korban chatas, a sin offering. If it was done purposefully, then you're liable to your kares, early um, uh, early death by the hands of heaven, not by court, by hands of heaven. And if it's done with two witnesses and they warn you, then you could be have the death penalty of stoning. So, provided though, when are you liable? He needs the ash that he creates. However, should a person kindle a fire with a destructive intent, he's not liable, for he is causing ruin. Right? So you're not liable, but it's still not permitted, right? Liable means that you just don't get the consequence, but it's still not permitted. Nevertheless, a person who sets fire to a heap of produce or a dwelling belonging to a colleague is liable because his intent is to take revenge on his enemies. Through this act, he calms his feelings and vents his anger. It's comparable to a person who rends his garment over a deceased person or in rage on Shabbos, or a person who injures a colleague in an argument, right? These individuals are considered to be performing constructive activity because of their evil inclination, right? In other words, it's soothing you, so therefore it's beneficial for you, and because there's a benefit. If when you do a malacha, a work on Shabbos, and you don't gain from it, so that's called destructive. Then it's not a biblical prohibition that you're liable. You're not allowed to do it, right? But you're not liable for bringing a korban, right? An offering if it was done accidentally, right? Because you gain nothing from it, right? The work, the activity here means that you did the activity, but you gained from it. So if you had an enemy that someone that you didn't like and you burnt down his home on Shabbos, right? You had benefit from it. That's what it means, right? So a person who lights a candle or wood, whether to generate warmth or light, is liable, right? Because you're getting benefit from it. A person who heats iron in order to strengthen it by submerging it in water is liable for performing a derivative forbidden labor of kindling. Okay. Okay, number 2. A person who extinguishes a fire, or even the smallest size, is liable. Extinguish a fire, even the smallest size, is liable. So now we're extinguishing, right? Just like lighting the fire, there's extinguishing the fire. This includes both one who extinguishes a candle and one who extinguishes a coal that comes from wood. In contrast, a person who extinguishes a glowing piece of metal is not liable.
Contradictory to a certain significance.
A fire is fueled by wood extinguishes a new entity. Aha. Because when you take wood and you put it out, then you made a new entity called charcoal. But when you took a glowing piece of metal and extinguished it, you're still left with a piece of metal. Nothing, not a new entity came. So that's all considered biblical work, right? By extinguishing. Now, you're not allowed to do it. The question is, to be liable means to fit the exact parameter of the biblical prohibition as opposed to prohibition that comes together with it, a liability, right? Again, one of the 3 things, right, that we mentioned. Otherwise, it doesn't have the biblical prohibition associated with the liability, but it's still prohibited. That would be, yeah, it's still prohibited. Okay? If however a person sins to purify the metal, he is liable. But here, because now you purified the metal because you got, you rid it of the dross that's in it when you do that, right? In other words, you did something beneficial through your work effort. That's the point. This indeed is a practice of blacksmith. They heat the iron until it glows like a coal and extinguish it in water to seal it. This is a process of purification of which one is liable. It is a derivative of the category of forbidden work, labor of extinguishing. It is permissible to extinguish a glowing piece of metal in the public place so that many people do not become injured by it. That's what you want to come and learn Torah? Want to come learn Torah? Come. Say hi to baby. Say hi to everybody. Say hi. We're learning Rambam.
I do.
Yeah, you're already speaking. They hear you.
Hello.
Okay. Okay. Hey guys, again. Now, but leave it here. Okay, go back downstairs into the office. Okay, guys? It's okay. He made his debut on social media. Stardom is coming.
That's arrived.
Yeah.
When a person does the heating of the iron, the metal, he's working. So he's also working with also prohibited.
So we're giving the parameters of what is work called. What does it mean? Well, just because you call it work doesn't mean the Torah calls it work, right? Right. If you took a piano and carried it in this room back and forth 100 times on Shabbos, you would be exhausted. Torah does not call that work. Right?
They get money from it.
Money's not work. If you got money for it, that's not called work. That's called payment for work. That's called work.
Gotcha.
Don't mix things up.
Thank you.
Kasha is kasha, borscht is borscht. Don't mix kasha and borscht. That's not so tasty. Okay? Right. Work. I mean, money, making money, or even taking money. Someone gave you money in your hand on Shabbos is not a biblical prohibition. It's a rabbinic prohibition, but not a biblical. We're talking about a biblical parameter for the law. There's a rabbinic parameter to the law that is much lesser, right? But the biblical parameter is that if you took the metal and you made it iron hot, right? So if you did like a blacksmith, because that, and you seal it in water afterwards. So forget, let's say you did it before Shabbos, you put it into the furnace before Shabbos. Now comes Shabbos, you took it out and you put it into the water. So now that you put it into the water, you extinguish. So extinguish is form of work, right? But it's only a form of work if there's some benefit that you have from it, right? So if the blacksmith is doing it in order to get out the dross and to seal it afterwards in the cold water, so there's a benefit in that form of work. That's called work. That's called malacha, right? That there's something that came out of the work, right? If you could take a piano back and forth in the same room, nothing came out of that, right? Except that you worked and sweated a lot, right? That's the idea here. Okay, does that make sense?
Absolutely benefit.
So a blacksmith does it for that reason, right? It is permissible to extinguish glowing piece of metal in the public domain, though, so many people do not become injured by it.
Okay.
So why? Because there's nothing beneficial there, right? Because to put out that piece of metal, right, for not a benefit has to be for the act that you're doing, not for the consequence of what you're doing. That someone else shouldn't step on it and burn themselves, that's a consequence of the work. That's not the work itself. David, you're not following. You're not listening.
I am.
Repeat what I just said.
Yeah.
Okay. Listen, so you can get the point over here.
Mhm.
We just said you could extinguish it.
Yeah.
Why? So someone shouldn't. Why? Because the act of extinguishing it for no purpose of no value in it of itself
Mhm.
is only a rabbinic law, right?
Mhm.
Not biblical law.
Mhm.
Because biblical law is only if there's a benefit in the work that you did.
Mhm.
There's no benefit here. In the work means in the essential work itself, not the consequence of the work, right?
No,
If there's a consequence from work, that's irrelevant to the work you did. So here, the consequence is that there's a benefit that people won't step on it and hurt themselves,
that's the benefit.
right? But that's a consequence of the work. That's not the work itself. When the blacksmith put it in there, that was for the benefit of the work itself. That what you did in the act of putting the hot metal into water to cool it off, that you sealed it, that's a benefit in the act of the work itself, right?
Mhm.
Not the consequence of the work. Is that clear? Okay.
Consequence is irrelevant.
That's why when it comes to a public danger, the rabbis didn't enact the law that you can't put out that fiery iron, that burning iron.
Coal?
Coal's different. We're talking about an iron, right? Because a coal, you create something. If you put out the coal, the wood became a coal, that might not fit this. Because in the act of doing it, you've created a coal, which is a different entity than what you started with. This is a piece of metal that stayed the same piece of metal, right? That's why we got to be very agile with our minds and pay attention,
Not
right?
read footnotes.
Huh?
Not read footnotes.
Not when we're explaining, something so you could appreciate the,
Thank you.
So a person who pours oil into a burning lamp is liable for kindling. So you're pouring oil into a burning lamp, right? Because you're increasing the kindling. You put more oil into the lamp, so you're increasing the kindling. So a person who takes oil from the lamp is liable for extinguishing, because you're now making less light or fire, right? So that's extinguishing. Interesting. Okay. Yeah, unfortunately, I have to stop here. It is tonight is B'dikas Chametz, search for the Chametz, and the day is short. All right, folks. Thank you for joining. Have an enjoyable B'dikas Chametz.
Thank you for grounding me. Seriously.